A moral alphabet in words of from 1 to 7 syllables. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. This reading is by Dennis Sayers. A moral alphabet in words of from 1 to 7 syllables by Hilaire. A stands for Archibald, who told no lies, and got this lovely volume for a prize. The upper school had combed and oiled their hair, and all the parents of the boys were there. In words that ring like thunder through the hall, draw tears from some, and loud applause from all. The pedagogue, with pardonable joy, bestows the gift upon the radiant boy. "Accept the noblest work produced as yet," says he, "upon the English alphabet. Next term I shall examine you, to find if you have read it thoroughly. So mind." And while the boys and parents cheered so loud that out of doors a large and anxious crowd had gathered, and was blocking up the street, the admirable child resumed his seat. Moral: learn from this justly irritating youth to brush your hair and teeth, and tell the truth. B stands for bear. When bears are seen approaching in the distance, make up your mind at once between retreat and armed resistance. A gentleman remained to fight. With what result for him? The bear, with ill-concealed delight, devoured him, limb by limb. Another person turned and ran away. He ran extremely hard. The bear was faster than the man, and beat him by a yard. Moral: decisive action in the hour of need denotes the hero, but does not succeed. C stands for cobra. When the cobra bites an Indian judge, the judge spends restless nights. Moral: this creature, though disgusting and appalling, conveys no kind of moral worth recalling. D for dreadful, the dreadful Dinotherium. He will have to do his best for D. The early world observed with awe his back indented like a saw. His look was gay, his voice was strong. His tail was neither short nor long. His trunk, or elongated nose, was not so large as some suppose. His teeth, as all the world allows, were graminivorous like a cow's. He therefore should have wished to pass long peaceful nights upon the grass, but being mad, the brute preferred to roost in branches like a bird. We have good reason to suppose he did so from his claw-like toes. A creature heavier than a whale, you see at once, could hardly fail to suffer badly when he slid and tumbled, as he always did. His fossil, therefore, comes to light all broken up, and serve him right. Moral: if you were born to walk the ground, remain there. Do not fool around. E for egg. E stands for egg. Moral: the moral of this verse is applicable to the young. Be terse. F for family. F for a family, taking a walk in Arcadia Terrace, no doubt. The parents indulge in intelligent talk, while the children they gambol about. At 6:15 they return to their tea, of a kind that would hardly be tempting to me, though my appetite passes belief. There is jam, ginger beer, buttered toast, marmalade, with a cold leg of mutton, and warm lemonade, and a large pigeon pie very skilfully made, to consist almost wholly of beef. Moral. A respectable family taking the air is a subject on which I could dwell. It contains all the morals that ever there were, and it sets an example as well. G for New. G stands for Gnu, whose weapons of defense are long, sharp, curling horns, and common sense. To these he adds a name so short and strong that even hardy boors pronounce it wrong. How often on a bright autumnal day the pious people of Pretoria say, "Come, let us hunt thee." Then no more is heard but sounds of strong men struggling with a word. Meanwhile the distant Gnu, with grateful eyes, observes his opportunity and flies. Moral. Child, if you have a rummy kind of name, remember to be thankful for the same. H for Horseman. H was a horseman who rode to the meet, and talked of the pads of the fox as his feet, an error which furnished subscribers with grounds for refusing to make him a master of hounds. He gave way thereupon to so fearful a rage that he sold up his stable and went on the stage, and had all the success that a man could desire in creating the part of the old English squire. Moral. In the learned professions, a person should know the advantage of having 2 strings to his bow. I for Indian. I, the poor Indian, justly called the poor, he has to eat his dinner off the floor. Moral. The moral these delightful lines afford is, living cheaply is its own reward. J for James. J stands for James, who thought it immaterial to pay his taxes, local or imperial. In vain the mother wept, the wife implored. James only yawned as though a trifle bored. The tax collector called again, but he was met with persiflage and repartee. When James was hauled before the learned judge, who lectured him, he loudly whispered, "Fudge." The judge was startled from his usual calm. He struck the desk before him with his palm, and roared in tones to make the boldest quail. J stands for James. It also stands for jail. And therefore, on a dark and dreadful day, policemen came and took him all away. Moral. The fate of James is typical and shows how little mercy people can expect who will not pay their taxes, saving those to which they conscientiously object. K for Klondike. K for the Klondike, a country of gold, where the winters are often excessively cold, where the lawn every morning is covered with rime, and skating continues for years at a time. Do you think that a climate can conquer the grit of the sons of the West? Not a bit, not a bit. When the weather looks nippy, the bold pioneers put on 2 pairs of stockings, and covered their ears, and roamed through the dear Hyperborean dales, with a vast apparatus of buckets and pails, or wander through wild Hyperborean glades, with hoes, hammers, pickaxes, matlocks, and spades. There are some who give rise to exuberant mirth by turning up nothing but bushels of earth, while those who have little cause excellent fun by attempting to pilfer from those who have none. At times the reward they will get for their pains is to strike very tempting auriferous veins, or, a shaft being sunk for some miles in the ground, not infrequently nuggets of value are found. They bring us the gold when their labors are ended, and we, after thanking them prettily, spend it. Moral: just you work for humanity, never you mind if humanity seems to have left you behind. L for Lady. L was a lady, advancing in age, who drove in her carriage and 6, with a couple of footmen, a coachman, and page, who were all of them regular bricks. If the coach ran away, or was smashed by a dray, or got into collisions and blocks, the page, with a courtesy rare for his years, would leap to the ground with inspiriting cheers, while the footman allayed her legitimate fears, and the coachman sat tight on his box. At night, as they met round an excellent meal, they would take it in turn to observe, what a lady, indeed! What a presence to feel! What a woman to worship and serve! But perhaps the most poignant of all their delights was to stand in a rapturous dream when she spoke to them kindly on Saturday nights, and said they deserved her esteem. Moral: now observe the reward of these dutiful lives. At the end of their loyal career, they each had a lodge at the end of the drives, and she left them 100 a year. Remember from this to be properly vexed when the newspaper editors say that the type of society shown in the text is rapidly passing away. M for Millionaire. M was a millionaire who sat at table and ate like this, as long as he was able. At 12:30, the waiters turned him out. He lived impoverished and died of gout. Moral: disgusting exhibition. Have a care when, later on, you are a millionaire, to rise from table feeling you could still take something more, and not be really ill. N for Ned. N stands for Ned, Maria's younger brother, who, walking one day, chose to gaze the other. In Blandford Square, a crowded part of town, 2 people on a tandem knocked him down, whereat a motor car, with warning shout, ran right on top and turned him inside out. The damages that he obtained from these maintained him all his life in cultured ease. Moral: the law protects you. Go your gentle way. The other man has always got to pay. O for Oxford. O stands for Oxford. Hail, salubrious seat of learning, academical retreat, home of my middle age, malarial spot, which people call medieval, though it's not. The marshes in the neighborhood can vie with Cambridge, but the town itself is dry, and serves to make a kind of fold or pen, wherein to herd a lot of learned men. Were I to write but half of what they know, it would exhaust the space reserved for O, and as my book must not be over big, I turn at once to P, which stands for pig. Moral: be taught by this to speak with moderation of places where, with decent application, one gets a good, sound, middle-class education. P for pig. P stands for pig, as I remarked before, a second cousin to the huge wild boar. But pigs are civilized, while huge wild boars live savagely, at random, out of doors, and in their coarse contempt for dainty foods, subsist on truffles which they find in woods. Not so the cultivated pig, who feels the need of several courses at his meals, but wrongly thinks it does not matter whether he takes them one by one or all together. Hence pigs devour, from lack of self-respect, what epicures would certainly reject. Moral: learn from the pig to take whatever fate or elder persons heap upon your plate. Q for quinine. Q for quinine, which children take with jam and little bits of cake. Moral: how idiotic! Can quinine replace cold baths and sound hygiene? R for reviewer. R, the reviewer, reviewing my book, at which he had barely intended to look, but the very first lines upon A were enough to convince him the verses were excellent stuff. So he wrote, without stopping, for several days, in terms of extreme but well-merited praise. To quote but one passage, "No person," says he, "will be really content without purchasing 3, while a parent will send for a dozen or more, and strew them about on the nursery floor. The versification might call for some strictures, were it not for its singular wit, while the pictures, though the handling of line is a little defective, make up amply in verve what they lack in perspective." Moral: the habit of constantly telling the truth will lend an additional luster to youth. S for snail. S stands for snail, who, though he be the least, is not an uninstructive, horned beast. His eyes are on his horns, and when you shout or tickle them, the horns go in and out. Had Providence seen proper to endow the furious unicorn or sober cow with such a gift, the one would never now appear so commonplace on coats of arms. And what a fortune for our failing farms if circus managers, with wealth untold, would take the cows for half their weight in gold. Moral: learn from the snail to take reproof with patience, and not put out your horns on all occasions. T for tourist. T for the genial tourist, who resides in Peckham, where he writes Italian guides. Moral: learn from this information not to cavil at slight mistakes in books on foreign travel. U for upas tree. U for the upas tree, that casts a blight on those that pull their sister's hair and fight. But, oh, the good! They wander undismayed, and, as the subtle artist has portrayed, dispend the golden hours at play beneath its shade. A friend of mine, a botanist, believes that good can even browse upon its leaves. I doubt it. Moral. Dear reader, if you chance to catch a sight of upas trees, betake yourself to flight. V for volunteer. V for the unobtrusive volunteer who fills the armies of the world with fear. Moral. Seek with the volunteer to put aside the empty pomp of military pride. W for water beetle. My little victim, let me trouble you to fix your active mind on W. The water beetle here shall teach a sermon far beyond your reach. He flabbergasts the human race by gliding on the water's face with ease, celerity, and grace. But if he ever stopped to think of how he did it, he would sink. Moral. Don't ask questions. X for nothing. No reasonable little child expects a grown-up man to make a rhyme on X. Moral. These verses teach a clever child to find excuse for doing all that he's inclined. Y for youth. Y stands for youth. It would have stood for yak, but that I wrote about him 2 years back. Youth is the pleasant springtime of our days, as Dante so mellifluously says, who always speaks of youth with proper praise. You have not got to youth, but when you do, you'll find what he and I have said is true. Moral. Youth's excellence should teach the modern wit first to be young, and then to boast of it. Z stands for Z-Boo. Z for this Z-Boo, who, like all Zebus, is held divine by scrupulous Hindus. Von Kettner writes it Zebu. Worst, Zebu. I split the difference and use the two. Moral. Idolatry, as you are well aware, is highly reprehensible. But there, we needn't bother. When we get to Z, our interest in the alphabet is dead. End of a Moral Alphabet. Read for LibriVox by Dennis Sayers in Modesto, California. Fall 2008.